Question 1. In the context of an industrial manufacturer evaluating environmental trade-offs between alternative raw materials, Mr. Nakamura leads a cross-functional team conducting a life cycle assessment (LCA). During the inventory phase, the team encounters difficulty determining the origin of certain emissions due to shared processes with unrelated products. What should Mr. Nakamura do in accordance with ISO 14040-006 principles? A. Ignore shared processes and continue based on available primary data. B. Apply an allocation procedure to appropriately distribute inputs and outputs. C. Exclude the shared process from the system boundary entirely. D. Request third-party review before deciding on allocation. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040 emphasizes the necessity of allocation when processes serve multiple functions or products. Clause 4342, ignoring or excluding shared processes, options, and C would breach the principle of comprehensiveness and result in loss of relevant data. Third-party review, D, is part of critical review, not a step for technical allocation decisions. Proper alloc ensures environmental burdens are proportionally assigned, maintaining transparency and scientific integrity. Question 2. From a practical standpoint, which of the following best explains why the principle of a functional unit is critical in LCA studies? A. It determines the financial viability of a product. B. It defines the basis for comparing different systems objectively. C. It determines the product's market share. D. It is required only when comparing renewable and non-renewable products. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. The functional unit is a key principle in ISO 14040 Clause 5.2, acting as a reference against which inputs and outputs are normalized. It enables comparability between alternative systems. Without a defined functional unit, results become subjective and incomparable. Financial viability. A. Market share. C. And conditional requirements. D. Are irrelevant within a 14040's goal scope phase. Question 3. As demonstrated by Is Oliveira's consultancy firm assisting client in evaluating the environmental burden of supply chain for packaging, she suggests including both upstream and downstream impacts. However, the client wants to focus only on direct production impacts. Which ISO 14040 principle is most relevant in guiding the correct scope definition? A. Principle of comprehensiveness. B. Allocation procedure. C. Critical review inclusion. D. System boundary convergence. Answer. Correct answer. Explanation. According to ISO 14040 Clause 435, the principle of comprehensiveness ensures all significant inputs, outputs, and impacts are included. It supports life cycle perspective, essential to valid LCA. Limiting analysis to direct impacts breaches this principle. Allocation. B. Review. C. And convergence. D. Relate to other LCA phases and are not about scope comprehensiveness. Question 4. The general consensus is that normalization and weighting are optional in LCA. What is the reason for their optional nature under ISO 14040 guidelines? A. They reduce the scientific integrity of LCA. B. They are unnecessary for process industries. C. They involve value judgments which vary across stakeholders. D. They are required only in the interpretation phase. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 444 treats normalization and weighting as optional because they involve value choices that depend on stakeholders' perspectives. Including them could compromise objectivity if not transparently documented. They are not restricted by industry type. B. Nor are they redundant or exclusive to interpretation. D. Question 5. While examining the role of assumptions and limitations in LCA, which of the following is a valid justification for explicitly documenting assumptions during the goal and scope phase? A. Assumptions improve the economic feasibility of the LCA. B. Explicit documentation supports transparency and consistency. C. Assumptions remove the need for data quality checks. D. ISO 14040 prohibits assumptions in system boundaries. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Documenting assumptions and limitations enhances transparency and allows for reproducibility as highlighted in ISO 14040 Clause 5.2 and 5.3. They inform the audience about data quality choices and simplifications enabling proper interpretation. Economic A. Avoidance of data quality. C. And prohibition of assumptions. D. Are incorrect under ISO principles. Question 6. In light of recent developments in plastic recycling, ISTA Singh evaluates coproduct allocation methods for a new composite packaging. E uses system expansion instead of physical allocation. Why is this approach acceptable under ISO 14040? A. System expansion simplifies LCA by reducing data requirements. B. It avoids allocation by incorporating additional functions into the system. C. It ignores emissions from secondary materials. D. ISO 14040 only permits economic allocation. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. System expansion is a valid allocation method as per ISO 14040 Clause 4342 used when coproducts exist. It includes additional functions, thus avoiding arbitrary allocation. It does not simplify LCAA, ignore emissions. C. Nor is ISO prescriptive about economic allocation alone. D. It must be applied transparently and consistently. Question 7. In comparison with other environmental assessment tools, how does LCA uniquely approach environmental evaluation according to ISO 14040? A. It uses qualitative risk ranking rather than quantitative metrics. B. It assesses environmental impacts across the entire life cycle of a product. C. It focuses only on emissions during manufacturing. D. It excludes waste and recycling considerations. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Unlike tools such as IO Environmental Impact Assessment, LCA adopts a life cycle perspective Clause 4.1 from raw material extraction to disposal. This distinguishes it from tools with narrower or phase-specific focus. Qualitative tools A. Manufacturing only. C. An omission of end-of-life phases. D. Are incorrect and contrary to ELCA's holistic nature. Question 8. To illustrate this point, is Fatima conducts an LCA to compare reusable versus single-use containers. During interpretation, she realizes results vary significantly depending on the assumed number of reuses. What ISO 14040-based analysis should she perform? A. Characterization analysis. B. Completeness check. C. Sensitivity analysis. D. Functional unit revision. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Sensitivity analysis. Clause 4.6.2 determines how results respond to changes in assumptions. E.g. number of reuses. It's crucial for ensuring robust interpretation. Characterization. A is part of LCA completeness. B ensures data coverage. And revising functional unit. D isn't warranted unless the goal changes. Question 9. Based on the information in ISO 14040, which of the following would be most appropriate during goal definition for an LCA comparing biodegradable and conventional packaging? A. Stating the intended audience and whether the results support comparative assertions. B. Identifying the raw materials used in each packaging. C. Estimating future consumer behavior. D. Listing third-party consultants used in the study. Answer. Correct answer. Explanation. Goal definition. Clause 5.2 must include intended applications audience and whether comparative assertions are involved. This influences scope data requirements and whether critical review is needed. Options B, C, and D relate to scope, background, or reporting, not the core of goal definition. Question 10. The foundation of a well-structured LCA includes the consideration of elementary flows. What are elementary flows as defined by ISO 14040? A. Market-based exchange values between coproducts. B. Materials or energy entering or leaving the system without further human transformation. C. Emissions filtered through waste treatment plants. D. Raw materials processed within the system boundary. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Elementary flows Clause 3.12 of ISO 14040 are inputs from or outputs to the environment that do not pass through human transformation systems. G. Coated air, water from river. They are critical for environmental load calculation. Market exchanges. A. Filtered emissions. C. And processed raw materials. D. Are not elementary flows. Question 11. During the process of designing a new product, ISOTAN's team conducts an LCA to determine which raw material, aluminum or biopolymer, has lower overall environmental impact. The team focuses solely on greenhouse gas emissions in the impact assessment. What is the potential issue with this approach according to ISO 14040? ISO prohibits the use of biopolymers in LCA. B. It violates the principle of relative approach by ignoring economic factors. C. It undermines comprehensiveness by failing to include other impact categories. D. Greenhouse gas emissions must always be normalized before interpretation. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14040 emphasizes comprehensiveness in LCA, clause 441, requiring that relevant impact categories be selected to reflect potential environmental issues. Focusing only on greenhouse gas emissions may omit significant factors like eutrophication or resource depletion, skewing results. Option D refers to normalization, which is optional, clause 444. Economic factors B and material prohibition A are irrelevant. Question 12. Under the assumption that two similar LCA studies report drastically different results for the same product system, what is the most appropriate first step in reconciling the difference according to ISO 14040 guidelines? A. Compare the weighting schemes applied during LCA. B. Evaluate the consistency in system boundaries and functional units. C. Determine the funding source of each study to identify bias. D. Recalculate both studies using external databases. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040, clause 463 stresses consistency checks during the interpretation phase. Discrepancies often stem from differing functional units, system boundaries, or data quality. Core elements influencing LCA outcomes. Funding source. C. In external databases. D. Do not address methodological consistency. Weighting A is optional and value-based. Question 13. From a historical standpoint, how did the development of the life cycle perspective influence the modern application of LCA in environmental decision-making? A. It shifted focus from product innovation to regulatory compliance. B. It emphasized the importance of considering environmental impacts over the full product life cycle. C. It discouraged the use of qualitative assessments. D. It limited LCA use to government environmental agencies. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. The evolution of LCA since the 1960s culminated in ISO 14040 formalizing the life cycle perspective, clause 4.1, stressing that environmental burdens should be considered from cradle to grave, not just during production or use. This holistic approach allows better informed, non-shifting decisions. Option A misstates the intent. C and D are incorrect limitations not supported by the standard. Question 14. Taking into account that elementary flows must be included in the inventory phase of an LCA, which of the following best exemplifies an elementary flow? A. Carbon dioxide released directly into the atmosphere. B. Ethanol transported between factories. C. Processed plastics used in packaging. D. Recycled aluminum returned into the production loop. Answer. Correct answer. Explanation. According to ISO 14040, clause 3.12, an elementary flow is a material or energy input-output directly between the environment and the system without further human transformation. Co-emitted to air fits this definition. Ethanol transport. B. Plastics. C. And recycled aluminum. D. Are product or intermediate flows, not elementary. Question 15. To what extent does system boundary selection affect the reliability of LCA outcomes in compliance with ISO 14040A? It defines the geographic limits of where a product can be sold. B. It has no impact if allocation is properly performed. C. It critically influences which inputs, outputs, and processes are included in the study. D. It is only relevant during critical review. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. System boundaries, Clause 5.3.2, are fundamental to LCA reliability, determining which life cycle stages and processes are included. Poorly defined boundaries can cause incomplete or misleading results. They do not refer to market geography. A. Improper allocation. B. Does not compensate for boundary as it is relevant throughout the LCA, not only during review. D. Question 16. Examining the consequences of data quality requirements in the inventory phase, what is the most important reason to define data quality during the scope phase of an LCA? A. It ensures political compliance with trade policies. B. It provides a benchmark for assessing completeness, precision, and representativeness. C. It allows conversion of all data into monetary units. D. It minimizes the use of any secondary data. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 5.3.5 emphasizes data quality requirements as a critical part of scope definition, enabling users to assess if collected data meets expectations for completeness, temporal, geographic, and technological representativeness. Monetary conversions. C. Political motives. A. Or banning secondary data. D. Are not required or practical in LC. Question 17. Among the various types of coproducts in LCA, what should be the first consideration when addressing multi-output processes according to ISO 14040? A. Use system expansion to avoid allocation. B. Apply allocation based on economic value. C. Recalculate emissions using normalization techniques. D. Avoid reporting coproduct burdens entirely. Answer. Correct answer. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 4.3.4.2 recommends avoiding allocation where possible, with system expansion being the preferred method. This involves including additional functions of coproducts in the analysis. Allocation by economic or physical properties is considered only when system expansion is not feasible. Normalization. C. And avoiding reporting. D. Contradict transparency principles. Question 18. During a stakeholder meeting, Ista Lopez presents an LCA comparing two alternative fuels. The peer criticizes the exclusion of transport emissions from the model. Ista Lopez responds that the exclusion was due to its negligible contribution based on a prior sensitivity analysis, which ISO 14040 concept supports his decision. A. Completeness check. B. Critical review. C. Relevance and cutoff criteria. D. Weighting process. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14040 allows for cutoff criteria based on relevance, particularly when inputs/outputs are proven to have negligible impact. Clause 5.3.4. A sensitivity analysis supports such exclusions. Completeness checks. A. Ensure data coverage. A critical review. B. Validates methodology but doesn't justify the exclusions. Weighting. D. Is part of optional. C. Question 19. The question remains whether comparative assertions disclosed to the public require additional procedural steps in LCA. What does ISO 14040 require in such cases? A. Normalization and weighting must be applied. B. ISO requires no changes if internal guidelines are followed. C. A critical review by a panel of interested parties must be conducted. D. Comparative assertions can be made without public disclosure. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 6.2 mandates that any comparative assertion intended for public disclosure undergo a critical review by a panel of interested parties to ensure transparency, consistency, and credibility. Options A and D misinterpret the scope and B conflicts with ISO's requirements for public-facing comparative claims. Question 20. With respect to interpretation of LCA results, what is the purpose of performing a consistency check as described in ISO 14040A? To ensure all impact categories are equally weighted. B. To validate that assumptions, methods, and data align with the defined goal and scope. C. To guarantee that all core products are allocated based on mass. D. To determine if the product system is economically viable. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Consistency checks. Clause 4. 6. 3. Ensure that assumptions, methodologies, and data choices are in harmony with the goal and scope definition, thus improving reliability and confidence in LCA results. Weighting. A. Mass-based allocation. C. An economic viability. D. Are unrelated to consistency validation. Question 21. When analyzing an LCA conducted for a newly developed biodegradable food container, Opta as is noted that the end-of-life phase was modeled using generic disposal data. However, the actual disposal pathway varies significantly between regions. According to ISO 14040, what should Opta as is do to address this concern in the interpretation phase? It recommends site-specific modeling where possible and conduct sensitivity analysis. B. Accept the generic data as long as it is published by a national authority. C. Omit the end-of-life phase from the interpretation altogether. D. Adjust the results to align with stakeholder expectations. Answer. Correct answer. Explanation. ISO 14040, Clause 462 recommends sensitivity analysis to evaluate how assumptions like generic versus site-specific data affect LCA outcomes. Since disposal methods vary regionally, using site-specific modeling enhances relevance. Omitting phases. C. Or adjusting to fit expectations. D. Compromises transparency and scientific robustness. Question 22. By evaluating the methods used in goal and scope definition, Kapoor observes that one of her LCA team members suggested defining the functional unit as 1 kilogram of packaging material. What is the potential problem with this functional unit according to ISO 14040 principles? A. It is too specific and violates ISO scope requirements. B. It does not reflect the function delivered by the product. C. It includes an economic allocation in the definition. D. It requires mandatory weighting to be valid. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Per ISO 14040, Clause 5.2, the functional unit must describe the function of the product, not just the quantity. 1 kilogram of packaging material is reference flow, not true functional unit, as it ignores performance like protection or shelf life. Weighting. D. Economic allocation. C. Or specificity. A. Do not apply. Question 23. A key distinction between product flow and elementary flow is essential for data modeling in LCA. Which of the following best distinguishes the product flow according to ISO 14040? A. It is the flow of materials or energy between a product system and the environment. B. It includes all flows that are waste-related and cannot be reused. C. It represents exchanges between unit processes that are subject to human transformation. D. It refers exclusively to economic flows across companies. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Product flows, ISO 14040, Clause 3.11, are exchanges within the product system, i.e., between unit processes. They differ from elementary flows, which go directly to from the environment. Clause 3.12. Option A describes elementary flow, waste-related. B. And economic flows. D. Are outside the technical definition of product flow. Question 24. During an external audit of an LCA study, the reviewer criticizes the study for not disclosing the method used for impact classification. Which ISO 14040 principle supports the reviewer's concern? A. Scientific approach. B. Iterative nature. C. Transparency. D. Functional equivalence. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14040 emphasizes transparency. Clause 4.1 throughout the LCA process. All methods, including classification techniques, must be clearly documented to ensure reproducibility and trust. Functional equivalence. D. Pertains to the functional unit. Iteration. B. Is a process characteristic and scientific approach it supports but does not replace transparency. Question 25. To better understand the relationship between data quality and uncertainty, Rossi conducts an uncertainty analysis after completing the LCA phase. Why is this step valuable in LCA according to ISO 14040? A. It allows the analyst to reduce the number of impact categories used. B. It helps determine how variability in data affects the robustness of conclusions. C. It allows allocation to be bypassed entirely. D. It replaces the need for completeness checks. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Uncertainty analysis. Clause 4.6.2 helps reveal how data variability influences outcomes, supporting robust decision-making. It complements completeness checks rather than replaces them. It does not justify skipping allocation. C. Or omitting impact categories. A. ISO emphasizes using it particularly when results are sensitive to key assumptions or data inputs. Question 26. During a critical review of an LCA comparing bamboo and plastic straws, the panel questions the selection of only climate change and water uses impact categories. According to ISO 14040, what is the most appropriate response to address this concern? A. Justify the impact category selected based on the goal and scope. B. Revise the study to include all possible environmental impacts. C. Focus on economic cost analysis instead. D. Reject the entire study due to incomplete LCA. Answer. Correct answer. Explanation. Impact category selection must align with goal and scope definition. Clause 4.4.2. If limited categories were selected with rationale, the study can remain valid, though it should acknowledge limitations. ISO 14040 does not require all categories to be used, only that justification and transparency be ensured. Rejection. D is extreme unless categories were arbitrarily omitted. Question 27. With the advent of artificial intelligence in manufacturing, LCA teams can now simulate process emissions using AI models. However, Becker's team raises concern about the reliability of these models. What ISO 14040 requirement must be satisfied before using such data in LCA? A. The AI model must be trained only with proprietary company data. B. The AI output must meet established data quality requirements. C. The model must be developed by ISO-accredited organizations. D. The results must be published in peer-reviewed journals. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 5.3.5 requires all input data to meet defined data quality requirements. Accuracy, completeness, consistency, and representativeness, whether generated by AI or other methods. Data must be reliable. Accreditation C and publication D are not ISO requirements, nor is proprietary limitation A. Question 20. Despite the fact that product A has low raw material emissions than product B, its end-of-life disposal causes significantly higher aquatic toxicity. What does ISO 14040 suggest regarding such trade-offs in LCA interpretation? A. Eliminate impact categories that favor product B. B. Use normalization and weighting to aggregate scores across categories. C. Recalculate the inventory without end-of-life emissions. D. Focus solely on the production phase to maintain consistency. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 4.4.4 treats normalization and weighting as optional tools to support interpretation, especially when trade-offs between impact categories arise. They help contextualize impacts that are subject to value choices. Omitting data C. Ignoring categories A. Or narrowing scope post hoc D. would violate transparency and comprehensiveness. Question 29. According to recent studies in ISO 14040, what is the reason LCA results should not be used in isolation for policymaking? A. LCA is not applicable to large-scale infrastructure. B. LCA requires economic validation to influence policy. C. Results are subject to methodological assumptions and limitations. D. ISO 14040 restricts public use of LCA outputs. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. LCA studies involve assumptions, allocation procedures, data limitations, and boundaries. Clause 6.1, which affect interpretation. Therefore, LCA should be used with caution in policymaking, ideally supported by additional analyses and stakeholder input. ISO does not prohibit public use. D. Nor does it require economic, B. or infrastructure exclusions. A. Question 30. The effectiveness of an LCA report is partially determined by how well it communicates results. Which of the following is a required element in an LCA report under ISO 14040A? A comprehensive cost-benefit analysis. B. A names and qualifications of all data contributors. C. A description of the goal and scope, including intended application. D. A complete listing of all brands evaluated in the study. Answer. Correct answer. See explanation. ISO 14040 clause 6.1 specifies that an LCA report must include the goal and scope, intended application, system boundaries, functional unit, data sources, and limitations. Cost analysis A is outside ISO 14040 scope. Listing brands. D is not required unless relevant to comparative assertions. Names of contributors. B may be part transparency, but are not mandated.